Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday, the 4th of February, and I want to talk about ego death, and I want to talk about spiritual reality. And when I say spiritual reality, is that there is a spiritual reality that will create an effect in this world. It is the spirit that creates the solid reality that we are all in. And those that do understand spirituality and that can work that on others are actually very powerful beings. There is a powerful knowledge in this world that is being worked. And it is being worked so that the few will have dominion over this world, which, by the way, was the intention of the biblical God from the start. He would give man knowledge. He would create man in his own image to be like him, to rule over everything and to have dominion over this world, which again is a shift in consciousness. It is a shift in desire that is actually not naturally in this world. There is no part that is naturally ruling over everything else. In nature, it does not exist. Not in this world. So let's talk about ego death. And that is spiritual knowledge. It is knowledge of cause and effect. And the effect is in this world. The outcome. The solid is the fruit of the Spirit. So we really must understand ourselves. We must stop following teachings blindly. Oh, they have such enlightened knowledge, we must all do it. We must all go there. We must all follow like sheep. I think we're waking up. We are waking up to the reality of it all and what it creates. That's the awakening. So, ego death. Now, let me just first say that everything that happens is a shift within yourself. I mean, this is a bit off subject at the moment, but I was listening to David Icke again, and he's still, in his interview saying that that there are shapeshifters in this world. And I'm not saying he didn't see it, or others didn't see it. I'm quite certain they did, because these capabilities of ours seem to be on the increase at the moment, which is why we need to know what it is we're doing. But he says they can shift. They shift. And no, they're not shifting. If something is in front of you and you suddenly see a reptilian, they did not shift. The shift happened inside of yourself. You shifted from one way of perceiving things like the five senses into a different layer of yourself. The emotional body, the thinking body, the energetic body. Those are shifts of consciousness. And the shift happened in you. The person in front of you has not changed. You're just seeing him differently because the shift occurred in you. Again, we need to see the source of all of this correctly. The source is us. It is something we are doing. And then we must understand what it is we're doing. And start interpreting what is happening around us correctly. Okay, ego death. First of all, I have for the longest time struggled with this word ego. What is that actually? Yeah? Some say, oh, ego is the body. Ego is self. It's just the illusion of individuality, which is actually not an illusion. That is actually reality. We are individuals. We can build connections. We can become part of a web. We have the choice. Again, we have self-determination. And that you can only have if you are an individual to start with. Without individuality, there is no self-determination. This is actually where ego death is leading. And then others say it's selfish, egoistic. Now, just because you have an ego does not mean you have to be egoistic. Again, that's a choice. That is where you put the main bulk of your attention on yourself. But you don't have to do that. Plenty of people don't do that. Yeah, they care about others. They are connected to others. The ego can connect. It does not have to be egoistic. That's a choice. Again, that is a choice. And another thing that I thought of from really looking at myself and what it is I'm doing is the ego is definitely linear. Yeah? Cause and effect in a linear fashion based on only a very small portion of what it is you know. Yeah? And then predicting a future and believing on that future and thereby, as I said, creating that future. That is the creative act. Bringing it into being. So for myself, and yeah, I'm going to harp on about money again, but that is the main problem in my life at the moment, and that's where I'm seeing what it is I'm doing in that aspect of my life. And that is, you look at your bank account, there's a certain amount there, you've got so and so many days to go before the next amount comes in. I need this, that, and the other. I can't do math. Yeah, no, I'm not completed yet. And then if you count it up, it's not enough. And that is what you know. That is what I know at that moment. But that is egoistic knowing. Ego knowing, so not egoistic knowing, ego knowing. Which is linear, which is really compartmentalized only on that one problem and the cause and effect that is coming from there. So, and like if I stand here now and say in 3 days' time that is going to happen, I don't actually know that. That's the point. I don't actually know that. I only know that if I do not allow for any other possibilities. That is the ego thinking. It does not allow for other possibilities. It is linear on one point to one point. So, and here we go quantum. Going from the linear into the quantum. Into the field, into thinking about all possibilities. Seeking. We are seeking other possibilities in the field. Getting out of the linear ego. And it is good because we are capable of doing that. Again, this is stuff that is now being shown to us in the effect that it has in this world. It is shown to us as the solid reality that it creates. But there are problems with that. Going into all possibilities. Now, first of all, again, for those other possibilities to appear in your life, the ego possibility has to step out of the way. It cannot say, I am the only one. That is ego. I am the only one. So maybe in a way, Yaldabaoth is the archetypal ego. Yeah, I am the only one that created all. There is nothing else. So it has to step out of the way. And here is really the scene of Jesus and Satan You know, get ye behind me, Satan. Ego, step out of the way. And yes, that was not ego death, because Jesus did not fight Satan to the death. In fact, they didn't really fight at all. Yeah. They had a conversation, and Jesus said, "Get ye behind me, step out of the way," which then led to an expanded awareness, which Jesus most certainly had. If you look at the stories, if you look at what he did, he most certainly was in a state of expanded awareness. Yeah, and so it's not no Satan offered him all the riches of the world and Jesus didn't want it. That's false. He got it. He told the ego to get out of the way and he got it. Right. But as I said, in this expanded place of awareness, you can move things that you could not move in the physical. You can affect matter in a way that you cannot affect in the physical. You can get connected to otherworldly consciousness and gain knowledge, receive knowledge from that otherworldly consciousness. All of those things are possible. I said, Jesus showed it in the story, it is known now in this world, and it is known increasingly so. I say, the whole thing is on the increase, and we need to know what it is we're doing. I don't know what is triggering this at the moment, but it's definitely there. And we have to deal with it. So, but here comes, whatever you do in expanded awareness, whether you move things, whether you change things, knowledge that you bring, again, from otherworldly entities, all of this has to work in this world. Everything that is new, any change that is created in this world has a knock-on effect on everything else. So it has to work with everything else. And that is the system of this world. It always has been. It has to be good for all. All shall live. So again, what Jesus said, it is the will of the Father that all shall live. So that is what we have to keep in consideration. What effect will it have in this world? What effect does it have on ourselves? What effect does it have on everything else? I mean, we are full on destructive at the moment, not considering consequences at all. And here is why. Because if this knowledge, if the change, the movement comes into this world, who is the judge of good and bad? The ego. It allows, it steps aside for the knowledge to come in. Yeah, but of all possibilities, whether that even works here or not is a different question. The possibility may exist, but whether it works here is a different question. So who is the judge of whether, even if the possibility is there, whether it should be implemented? And there you go back to linear thinking of cause and effect, which means you go back into ego thinking as the judge. The ego is the judge of this world, should be the judge of this world, because it is the knowledge of outcomes. And here comes that people go through ego death, which again is not what Jesus did. Well, Jesus did it, I said, two ways. Get ye behind me, Satan, and then greater things will you do in that state of expanded awareness. But he also went through ego death, and that is the way of the cross. That was the other way. That is complete ego death, and that is, as I say, you can have too much of a good thing. And he showed us the outcome. The outcome is in the Bible. It is a book of Revelation. It is a destruction of humanity. And I mean, physical destruction of reality, of humanity, of this world. That is the outcome of ego death. Ego stepping aside for a period of time, but then us returning into ego consciousness to judge whether this should actually be done or not. That is the correct way. So it's an expansion and retraction all the time. And that is really the function of the ego. Every state of consciousness that you have has got its own specific function. They're all part of you. They were all created from the beginning, and they have a function. And the function of the ego is so that you know what's good for yourself or what isn't, which the world seems to have lost a hold of. What's good for humanity? Or you mustn't think what's good for humanity, because that's egoistic. Hello? Now, again, ego, death. You're going through the process of death. A part of you is dying. Again, you say that part must die for the Christ to be born. No, it doesn't have to die. It can step aside. There is a function within us that we need to learn. We're obviously not aware of it, how to do that at the moment, because we don't know ourselves. But there is obviously a function there where it can step aside and where it can come back. It does not have to die, but people going through ego death, and then you're going through the process of mourning death. You're mourning the death of a part of yourself. 5 stages of mourning. That is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The last part is acceptance. Acceptance of the inevitable. And here comes again, everybody goes, it is the will of a higher consciousness. They're expanding into that and denying themselves, losing themselves. The self is dying, and it ends up in acceptance. And acceptance is acquiescence. Ego death ends in acquiescence. This is spiritual knowledge. Somebody is working this. There's spiritual wickedness in high places. They're putting these teachings out. And then really ask yourself, cui bono, who benefits? Is this really taking us all to a great place of enlightenment? Or does it take us to a place of acceptance, of acquiescence, where we do no longer know ourselves and where we're being ruled over by another will, because we have killed our own ego? This is biblical, folks. This is biblical. This is God having dominion of some, not the all, but a being with knowledge, or beings with knowledge, that are powerful because they are one, under the one intention to have dominion over this world, to have rulership over humanity, that we shall be their slaves. This is their spiritual knowledge. Put us through ego death. And actually they're not putting us through ego death, they're just planting a seed. We're doing it. We are joyfully, we're receiving the news joyfully, and we are doing it. We're killing ourselves. As I said, the outcome of it is acceptance and acquiescence. And I can say this is a reality in this world because I hear the ones that are going through ego death. I can hear them, I can hear what they're saying. They are conveying their experience. And that is to say, they are conveying the knowledge on their newly found state of consciousness. And that knowledge is that nothing matters. That it is the will of some higher consciousness. Yeah, everything is good. Yeah, the world is going to shit around you, children are dying, you're dying of cancer, and it's all good. It's the will of a loving creator. I mean, that's the height of lunacy. That is where you have actually lost it, because you've lost yourself. If that is the will of, if the creator is love in all of this, he's got a funny way of showing that. It becomes more and more nonsensical. You are losing the plot because you're losing yourself. You're losing judgment. You're absolutely losing judgment. You're losing discernment. In a state of expanded awareness, the ego is not there to have discernment about what is good for you or what is bad for you. You just accept everything as good. It's all love. It's all good. Loss of discernment, loss of knowledge of self, acceptance, acquiescence, being ruled over. And so in the first instance, what Jesus taught in the story of his encounter with Satan was his encounter with his own ego. He did not go through ego death. In fact, his ego was in the background. It was in the background. Something else had come to the forefront. Another knowing, another layer of ourselves had come to the forefront. But the ego was always in the background. It spoke. It spoke through others. It warned him when he was on his way to the cross. It warned him, don't go there. And he would not listen. That's another thing I was thinking, because if you continuously practice stepping out of the ego, going into expanded awareness. If you say the ego is like a muscle, and if you don't use it, you lose it. So it's this a practice that we should be aware of how much do we do it, and that it can actually lead to the loss of the ego after a while. Like a muscle that you don't use. But as I said, this is being taught as the height of enlightenment. Complete loss of judgment and discernment is now the height of enlightenment. Acceptance of a higher rulership, of a higher ruler that has dominion over you, is now the height of enlightenment. Acceptance of your own part as just being a puppet that's being led by something else is the height of enlightenment. Acquiescence, acceptance is the height of enlightenment. And who's working that? And who's benefiting from that? It's not the will of the Creator. The ego was created. It is there, it exists, and it does fulfill a function in yourself. It is there because it fulfills a function. And you can see the effects in this world, what it creates, what the spiritual shift creates in this world. You can see the effect and you can see what it is doing. And it creates people that will no longer stand up to anything, that let everything happen without any discernment of their own, without any judgment. Yeah, and when we're all there, are we then totally enlightened beings? I would not call that enlightenment. So no, we should not go to ego death. That is a step too far. We must keep the ego so we know where we're at, and so we know what is good for us, so that we are of sound judgment. We need to keep the ego. And I say, just even inadvertently can overuse of this expanded state of awareness lead to ego death, even if you didn't intend that. We are doing things now. We are going into an unknown part of ourselves. We are creating changes. And as I said, we need to know what it is we're doing. We need to understand ourselves. We need to understand the workings of the... This is all made up of several parts. This machinery is not just one block thing. It's like everything else. It's made out of parts, different functions that do different things. And see, if you're a baby born into a physical body, you have to learn to use your hands, to use your feet, to have body coordination. Yeah? You have to learn all those things. Going into the spiritual is learning to use a new body, a different body. And you are like a baby at the start. You need to learn how to use it. And that is what we must do. But not by following these teachings that say, or suppress the ego, that the ego must die for the Christ to be born. It doesn't. It can simply step out of the way if you learn how to use that other body. So that is what we must do. And we really must become realistic about it. We absolutely must become realistic about it. We must get out of fairy tales and, great enlightenment, and I don't know what. But down to earth, see cause and effect, know what it is we're doing. Because as I said, we are already destructive beings. And if we become spiritual in this mindset, we will become destructive on speed. That's all that will happen. I think many already have become that. Their ego stepped out of the sight and now they are the servants to a higher will. And they can do whatever because there is no more human discernment there. This is how this can be used, ego death. And it is being used in that way. So, anyway, here, I leave it at that for today. We must start thinking about the teachings. We must start thinking of what is happening within ourselves, and we must thinking about the cause and the effect that it has in this world, because it matters. We are what we are. This is our world. This is our home, and it matters. Therefore, you need an ego. You need to know what you are. I am that I am. You need to know what it is you are. Anyway, I leave it at that for today. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.